Welcome to Hardly. Each book is distilled into 3 stories, giving you the key ideas in minutes. Today we listen to Sebastian Junger's In My Time of Dying, How I Came Face to Face with the Idea of an Afterlife, in which we probe into the struggle against nature's indifference, the fragility of human connection in the face of death, the random nature of survival and loss. Sebastian Junger is the New York Times best-selling author and co-director of the Academy Award-nominated documentary, Restrepo. Don't go away. Hurdley the editor will be right back with the story. The first story takes us to a freezing January beach, where the narrator stands alone, ready to surf waves that seem deceptively familiar. He recalls having surfed here many times before, but never in winter. With neoprene boots and a winter wetsuit, he wades into the icy waters, unaware of the brutal reality that awaits him. The waves rise higher than anticipated, breaking with a force that strips him of control. As the ocean drags him under, the realization sets in that this isn't just any wave. This is nature, and it doesn't care whether he lives or dies. He fights against the sheer violence of the water, getting thrashed until his breath is knocked out of him. With his board leash snapped and body pummeled, a calm but terrifying thought surfaces. I was young and had no idea the world killed people so casually. It's in this chaos that he discovers the limits of his strength and the randomness of survival. He emerges from the water, battered but alive, with the cold realization that life, much like the ocean, can be indifferent to those caught in its currents. In moments like these, the lesson is stark. Preparation only goes so far when faced with forces beyond control. The only thing you can do is respect the dangers and embrace the unpredictability of the world around you. As life's waves come crashing down, understanding your limits might just save you. Emerging from this brutal encounter with nature, the narrator introduces a reflection on how humans confront danger and randomness, not just in nature, but in everyday life. This leads into the next story, where survival is more dependent on the physical risks we choose to take and the illusion of control we often cling to. The second story takes us up into the air, quite literally. The narrator recounts his time as a climber for tree removal companies, where he often found himself suspended 50 feet in the air, wielding a chainsaw. It's a job where every movement matters because a single mistake could send you plummeting. One day, working on an old tree, his chainsaw catches on a branch, and the entire tree begins to collapse toward him. His instincts kick in as he leaps from the tree, managing to avoid both the falling trunk and the still-running chainsaw. As he recollects, the existential charm of tree work is that your fate is entirely in your hands. All the information you need to survive is right in front of you, and if you don't, it's because you made a mistake. The job of tree climbing, much like life, offers a sense of control, until a hidden rot or an unexpected gust of wind reminds you that not everything is predictable. In this instance, the narrator manages to escape unharmed, but he understands that the difference between life and death was razor thin. There was no warning of the hidden dangers lurking in the tree. The lesson here is subtle but crucial. While we can control our actions, life's unexpected twists, like a hidden rot or a snapped branch, are beyond our ability to predict. The best we can do is stay aware, make decisions carefully, and accept that some outcomes lie outside our grasp. With each climb, each risk, we hope that preparation and luck will be on our side, but we can never be entirely sure. And so, the narrative shifts from physical risk to a different kind of randomness, the kind that comes from external forces over which we have no control. This leads into the final story, one of human conflict and the arbitrary nature of survival in war. In the final story, we find ourselves in the middle of a firefight in Libya, where the narrator's friend, a war photographer, Tim, is fatally injured by shrapnel. The randomness of this moment haunts the narrator as he reflects on how he had nearly joined Tim on that assignment, but had pulled out at the last minute. Tim, on the other hand, was hit by a single mortar round. The devastating simplicity of that event, a lone piece of metal severing an artery, becomes a harsh reminder of how fragile life is. The narrator's mind lingers on whether Tim was aware that he was dying as he bled out.
question of why him remains unanswered, and it brings the narrator to a sobering realization. The randomness that can kill you will also save you. This time, he wasn't in the wrong place at the wrong time, but that could easily have been different. The takeaway from this story lies in accepting the unpredictability of life. We may make plans, take precautions, and calculate risks, but ultimately, the forces of the world, whether it's nature, fate, or war, can change everything in a heartbeat. It's not about living in fear, but about acknowledging that some things are beyond our control, and that's okay. All three stories weave together a theme of vulnerability. In each case, whether battling nature, navigating the risks of a high-stakes job, or surviving in a war zone, life can end or change dramatically without warning. These stories highlight the thin line between survival and loss, how little control we truly have, and the fact that every decision, every random twist, can determine our fate. As the editor of Herdly, by learning from these stories, we can cultivate a deeper awareness of life's unpredictability. We may not always be able to control the outcome, but we can approach life with more humility and readiness to adapt when things don't go as planned. Each story comes from the most representative real-life cases selected by the Herdly team from this book. There are 12 other stories within these pages that are just as compelling and worth reading. If you wish to dive deeper, we recommend purchasing the full book.
In reflecting on the unpredictability of life, we are reminded of the narrator's experience with a near-fatal medical emergency. One afternoon, he suddenly feels an intense pain in his abdomen. At first, it seems like nothing too alarming, just discomfort, but soon he can barely stand. His wife helps him to the car, and they rush to the hospital. What follows is a terrifying descent into hemorrhagic shock as doctors work to identify the internal bleeding. The narrator begins to lose consciousness, describing the experience of sinking into a black void. With his life hanging by a thread, he reflects on how sudden and arbitrary this crisis was. One moment he was clearing brush, the next, he was on the edge of death. The randomness of his survival, much like the previous stories, reinforces the book's central message. Life is fragile, and our fate is often dictated by forces outside our control. His survival was not guaranteed, but rather a series of lucky breaks and timely medical intervention. In revisiting the key ideas of the book, nature's indifference, the vulnerability of human connection, and the randomness of survival, it's clear that each story offers a window into how we confront these forces. Whether facing a brutal ocean, a dangerous job, or a near-death experience, we are reminded that life is not something we can fully control. These stories leave us with a sense of humility in the face of uncertainty, pushing us to value the moments we have and the connections we share, however fragile they may be.